Hello everyone, this is Denise at Something Beautiful Handcrafts, and I am giving you an overhead view of my ribber here. If you haven't been following along, this is my circular sock machine. It is a New Zealand auto knitter, or NZAK for short. And basically what that means is that it was actually made in New Zealand. The parts are shipped from New Zealand, and it is styled after the auto knitter style of circular sock machine. So there was a previous manufacturer of sock machines that was called the auto knitter. And this is the modern New Zealand updated version of that type of machine. Okay, modeled after that. So now this whole assembly on the top is basically the ribber assembly or the ribber. So welcome to the ribber assembly here, and it consists of this entire piece. Now, the beautiful thing is that my machine came with a manual, and I assume that all modern machines come with manuals, and there are some antique machines that you can get the manual if you didn't get it when you got the machine. There are websites like, I want to say it's Angora Valley Fibers, and I want to say that Caramel, which is CSM Love, has some manuals on her site. If not, when you go to the CSM Love site, she can tell you where to get the manuals at. And some you can find by Google search. I know the Krillman one that I found by Google search. But in any case, it's really handy if you have your manual. It helps. So at any rate, I got this guy, and it was mostly disassembled, made it much easier for shipping. So I had to put some pieces together. The manual turned out really nicely to help. A nice big walkthrough. So I'm just going to kind of tell you what you're seeing here. Okay, so first of all, you've got this whole thing called the ribber assembly. This, of course, is the ribber arm, and it is the piece that connects to the actual cylinder body. I think I want to call it the camshell of the machine. And it's actually the cam that rotates here and not the cylinder itself. So as this cam rotates, the arm moves and it pushes the tappet plate, and that's what makes the needles come out. So as I said, this right here is a tappet plate, and it is the little brain of the ribber. It controls the setting devices for the ribber, and it has its own cams down here, and they move the needles in and out. Now the tappet plate sits on top of the ribber dial, and that's this thing down here, this gray cylinder. For the ribber dial, I have a ribber dial for every cylinder that I have, and it has half the needles. I want to say that I'm not really sure what to call it. I know a 1-to-1 means that it would have the same number of needles as a cylinder. So maybe this is a 2-to-1, 1-to-2. I'm not 1-to-2 maybe. At any rate, it's half. So there are 64 needles on this cylinder, and there are 32 needles here. And so I remove half the needles and place the ribber into the position where it is half inside the spaces where the needles have been removed. Now, just like this cam here, the cylinder does not rotate, and neither does the ribber dial. It's the tappet plate that rotates, just like this cam rotates. And so in order to keep the ribber dial from moving, it has a stopper on it. That's this piece right here. And when I set the ribber dial, the whole ribber assembly, onto the body of the machine, there's a stopper. And I'm not sure if you can see it. At some point, I guess I have to take this off so you can look in there. But there's just, you can kind of see that little bit of black paint kind of peek it out down there, and that is the stopper arm. Some machines have a screw in here where you attach a stopper to the cylinder. In this case, my stopper is clamped onto the body of the machine underneath here and clamped onto the cylinder. So when I put a cylinder inside the machine, I kind of lean this forward and slide it in between the gears of the cam and this arm right here. I can also just loosen the arm too and put it down in there. And there's a little divot inside my cylinder, and I'll show you that later, I guess, when I break down the different cylinders. There's a little divot there where I sit the cylinder into so that it goes kind of over and clamps up against the cylinder itself. So I set this guy on there, and of course if my needles are out of work, then you'll be able to see it. And I can turn this. I can't turn it because if it's up against the stopper. See, my needles are not quite out of work. I have to make sure I leave them out of work when I turn it. Oh, I got to pull the pin out. Okay, so here we go. Right, it'll spin freely. Okay, now they're out. It'll spin freely until it gets to that stopper. I can't spin it anymore. Okay, now this is the pin that pushes against the tappet plate as the cylinder moves. I'm not turning the crank because my machine is set up already to put the yarn in, and I don't want to disturb it. Okay, then I have to set it up all over again. Okay, so at any rate, let's look at the tappet plate. So I have to take the rubber apart in order for you to see underneath the tappet plate. So first I pulled out the pin, then this screw right here is what holds the rubber arm onto the stem here. Take that out. You have to be very careful. Do not want to lose the brass stopper. That would be very unfortunate. And there it goes. Huh. Well, then this pin comes out. I guess I probably could call it a shaft. And I also want to do this carefully enough that none of the needles fall out. Oh, okay, there we go. Okay, so here is the underside of my ribber, or the tappet plate. And so let's have a look here. Okay, this is the tension adjuster right here. And it is a threaded screw right here. Now, the tension adjuster determines the tightness of the ribber stitches and the size of the stitches, whether you get small stitches, okay? And what it does is, for larger ribber stitches, you move the pointer towards the center, and the needles will be pulled further in under the tappet plate. They'll make bigger stitches, okay? For the smaller stitches, you move the pointer towards the outer edge of the tappet plate. So the closer to the center you are, the larger. The further away from the center, going towards the edge of the plate where my thumb is, the smaller the stitches will be, okay? So when you have the tension adjuster close to the edge of the tappet plate, the needles are only pulled in a little way under the tappet plate and they form smaller loops, okay? So let me set it again. If you want larger ribber stitches, you take it away from the edge and closer to the center. If you want smaller ribber stitches, you move it closer to the edge. I want medium stitch, and so this should be in the middle. And basically I set my tension and I don't usually bother it again. Okay, at some point during the, whole ribbering and something like that, things are going to get a little out of whack. It happens. Like nothing stays really set permanently, I guess. So I might have to sometimes adjust it a little and tighten the screw, but that really hasn't happened yet. It might need to happen when I change yarns, because the Croy yarn is generally a little thicker, so I wouldn't knit it at the same tension as I would the alpaca I'm doing now. So that would be a cause for me to loosen. And according to the NZAK manual, my adjustment never needs to go all the way one way or the other. It's always going to be somewhere slightly off of the middle. And that's what I've come to find too. So if it's moved too far to the center, it'll jam. Okay. So, and then they show me a picture about how far really I should be adjusting it, and not much more than that. Okay, so this guy over here is my in out switch. It's what moves my needles in or out. And basically what it does here is there is this little cam right here. Okay. And what it does is it switches the path that the needles follow. And if they aren't following a particular path, then they do not go into work. Okay. Here's the scary part. Let me move this for you. When I first got the NZAK, I got it used, but it wasn't really heavily used. And so it was basically new. And then the cylinders and needles and things were all new too. So they needed a little spiffing. And if you're an NZAK owner, you probably know what I'm talking about. Just going to stop there. So I had a really hard time getting my needle, my switch here, to go in and out. And it says not to use any type of tools to bend the needle in and out, because you could break the lever. And I mean, it was really hard. Like sometimes I just had to put like a pencil right here as I pushed. I mean, I was breaking off fingernails trying to get this thing to move, and it still doesn't quite really. That's a little better. Sometimes it gets a little sticky, and I just could not get it to work. And then it jammed all the time. I had a big problem with that. The switch would not turn. Okay, so now the NZAK book says that this switch never needs to come out, and it's basically glued in and yada yada. So you shouldn't do that. But that's exactly what I did. I took the pin out, the lever out. This pin pushed it out. Then I popped the cam up and I sanded the groove, because what I noticed is that as the needles were taking the path, they got caught. There was a big burr right here, and there was a burr right here. And they got caught here and jammed, which is why my in and out switch wouldn't completely turn really well. It was jammed, and the needles got jammed right here. It was higher up than the path of the needle, so they kept hitting the top of the in and out switch. And then as they turned the pathway, they would jam against the sides here, and they would not turn completely. So I got a lot of jam. So basically what I did is I took my Dremel out, and you can see how I sanded a path crosshair. I sanded down the this right here. I sanded down the knob so that it was ground down to the flat level of this path, and I sanded a groove into the path here. So now my needles move perfectly smooth. My river is okay. So it's not like I'm recommending, like grinding down your tappet plate. I'm just saying that, especially if you have an NZAK, there are some places on the machine that do have some burrs. And sometimes if you're having a problem, it is user error. And sometimes if you're having a problem, your machine needs a little polish. So consult somebody and get that taken care of. So anyway, that's what the tappet plate looks like. So if I am in work, the path is open for the needles to go around, and they're pushed out, and they're in work. So with the switch in this direction, the dial just moves around in a circle, and none of the needles are pushed into service. Bam, that's how that works. So basically I put the shaft back in, And you can see here see how all of the needles are in a neat circle. When they are out of work, they're all together. See, there's always one that wants to misbehave. When they are out of work, they are all in this nice little tidy circle. This is the same little tidy circle that you see on the dial that's out of work. And the dial just moves around freely in a circle and nobody gets pushed in the service. Okay, so I oil my dial, of course, across the surface of where metal touches metal, because metal is grinding metal in that space. Or as I do with my stopper. Oh, that's right. Put my stopper back on. Put the arm back on. Then I put the screw in and tighten it on. Okay, so this screw right here controls the height. And your ribber needs to sit a certain height from the cylinder in order to knit well. I found that my ribber seems to move smoothly where I am fairly deep inside of the cylinder, but not so deep that it's like below the cylinder line. So basically the bottom of the rubber dial is just tiny bit above the cylinder. And so when I get it adjusted where I like it, I turn the bolt, and the screw is sitting all the way down here, and this bolt keeps the screw in the right place. Okay, last but not least is the timing screw. Let's turn this guy around. And the timing screw is the screw that this pin is actually pushing against. And what the timing screw does is it pushes the needles out at a certain speed or rhythm or whatever. But the whole point is that you want these needles coming out so that they meet the yarn guide. If the timing is off, sometimes they'll come out too early. And sometimes if the timing is off, they will come out too late as this is pushed around. And you definitely don't want to do that. If they come out too early, things tend to jam. If they come out too late, then what's happening is it's not catching the yarn. It's like, well, I have this problem. I still have this problem with the bottom of the cylinder here. So I'm still working on that. But what happens is as my yarn is moving, one of my side needles comes up in advance of the yarn too early, and by the time the yarn gets to it, it has already dropped. So for some reason, and this only happens when I'm doing a heel, for some reason my timing is off when I am knitting flat. I haven't quite figured out how to fix that one on there, but in this case, when I first, because it was all disassembled, sometimes I would have these needles coming out too far in advance and they would drop the stitch, or because what would happen is I would move the yarn guide, they would come out, and as the yarn guide got to them, because the timing was off, they would go back in before they caught the yarn instead of drop the stitch. So this timing is really important. The new machines generally come time, like I said, this should have came time, but through the hustle and bustle of being packed and being knocked around, or who knows what I did to it when I was assembling it, it had to be retimed. Once I set the timing, I never move this bad boy again. It is fine the way it is. Okay, but I do watch it just in case, because I mean, I don't know, where it might go off, so it's always my first suspect. So I'm about to set the rubber up for some knitting. Let me tell you what's going on here. And I have to apologize in advance because, as usual, in this small room with everything congested, trying to put the camera somewhere that gets you close enough but doesn't interfere with the knitting is always an issue. Okay, so first of all, there's already a sock on here. And there is the waist yarn, several rows. And then this is the ripcord. And I actually remembered this time. I knit quite a few of these before I remember to make it. And this is just crochet cotton. And basically it's just going to allow me to pull and separate the socks with ease. And so I'm using, I think it's called Wana. Anyway, it's a salvage edge up here that'll give you a tighter salvage edge, because before I was just knitting and I had this really stretchy edge, and it didn't unravel, but it didn't look all that neat. Kind of looked almost like it was a picot at the top. So I wanted something a little neater. And basically, here's what happens. Before this, if you watch my other videos, I put the rubber on when it was time to do the work yarn, and I just tried to pull the waist yarn and that tail end down past here, and this started knitting from there. But in this case, I knit one row. Let me put my weights on. I'm going to knit one row of the work yarn, and then after I do that one row of the work yarn, then I put the stitches on the ribber from there, and then begin the knitting. Here's also what I discovered too is before, you know what, I'm not actually sure why I had a problem, but I've been having a problem with the ribber latches lifting the last couple times, and that's because when I was doing a sock snake, it changed the weight distribution of this sock right here. So I had more weight on one side than the other because of the sock snake. So in order to balance that off, I'm doing something I wasn't doing before. First of all, before when I was putting the rubber on, I couldn't see anything on the inside because I was making the rubber stitches and the cylinder stitches at the same time with the work yarn. So nothing could be seen. In this case, because I have access to the cylinder, as I put that first row on, I am able to see what's happening with my heel right here. And then what it was is that the stitches that were on the heel did not have as much weight as the stitches that were not part of the heel. So I can see this really clearly now with the top of this open. So that's going to allow me to stitch this properly. So let me put the heel spring on and start the stitching. As far as I know, everything is set. Of course, you find out things are wrong once you start stitching. So I'm going around one pass. Let me take this thing off so it doesn't bump anything on the way around. Like I said, normally this is something I was doing with the rubber on for our first stitch. Okay, I'm going to stop here. Now, here's what I have discovered. The needles are out, and I want to know when my rubber is going to start knitting. So, turn this. I have, for the most part, discovered that my rubber starts knitting about 3 needles prior to where I actually want to start. So I want to start my work here, right? So 1, 2, 3. So I'm going to crank the yarn to about here. Then I'm going to put my needle in work. Now, here's what else is happening. What I'm doing is I'm lifting that stitch that is in between, that space stitch. I'm lifting that onto the needle. And what that does is that gives this stitch some tension. And that is what's causing the salvage to look a lot cleaner. And I know when Melissa does hers, she cranks 2 rows sometimes and lifts 2 rows on top of the rubber needle, and that gives an even cleaner edge. I'm just doing 1, and actually I found 1 is clean enough for me. And then what I'm going to do after that is turn that second row with the heel spring on. It's going to be nice and tight. So I'm going to wind up with this nice, clean kind of edge. And seriously, that's all it took. And actually, this is better for me too, because like I said, I can see what's happening under that cylinder. When I'm making that first stitch, I can pull that yarn snug. I added a paper clip to be a hook at the end, so that as I'm turning that first stitch, I can pull that tension and make sure that one's nice and snug too. And so I don't have that wobbly looking edge anymore. It's all nice and clean and crisp. So I take this as far around as I can. Sometimes I'll crank sooner because it is easier not to work with that rubber arm in your way. And also, of course, at some point I'm going to run out of real estate because I can't get these needles out with the tappet plate in the way. See, they only come out so far. I wonder if you're getting enough light. Okay, so turn it just a little. And now I'm fighting with the birds nesting on top of my air conditioner. That needs to be removed. Okay, anyway, so I'm going to slowly turn. And it's beautiful. I don't know. You can't see this. Maybe you can see this. Nope, probably not past the arm. But the needle that I want to be in work is going to be in work. How beautiful is that? Put that. I gotta pull that just a little tighter. I want this to be a little tighter on this needle. Of course, I forgot to put the yarn on it, but it's most certainly in work. So I got it in the right spot. And you know what? If for some reason you don't get it in the right spot, like, you could just put it on later as it passes. But that's pretty cool. Okay, so I'm just going to continue around like this. This is also cool too because I don't have to worry about starting the rib and missing any of my latches because I'm purposely putting these guys on here. So I'm doing a latch check as I go around. And I know it's on there because I put it on there. And yeah, it's a little extra step. And it's not terrible. And to me, it's totally worth it to get that cleaner edge. There are other salvages to do. I need to crank past that. There are other salvages. This is like the quick and dirty method salvage. Okay, that one. There we go. And this one. Okay, so as far as I can tell, everything is good to go. I think I got enough weight on there. And my counter is where it needs to be for the most part. So I can go ahead and crank. There is something in the way of my yarn. I can always tell if I am starting to crank and I've got some type of issue happening, that there is something in the way of my yarn and it's time for me to fix that. So if you are going and you've got your tension doesn't feel right, stop and check it out. Don't force it. Alrighty. And oh, I see what I want. Okay, now I am past the mark here, so I'm going to go ahead and take the heel weight off. And to make sure everything is all happy, got to readjust my, there we go. Needed to readjust the counter. Okay, there we go. See how nice and smooth that is now. Now, like I said, the timing tells well, it forces the needles out so that they're matched up with the arrival of the yarn carrier. So my timing is fine. My needles are coming out the right time. They're pulling back at the right time. I've got a sticky latch right here, but it's not dropping the stitch, so it's going to be okay. But that makes me think, though, that I might need to adjust the weight a bit over here. Sometimes the little claws here for the, sometimes the little claws for the heel weight come out, so you only have like one claw inside. That's perfect. Oh, now you're getting a little glare off the light. Let me kind of... Lighting is such a delicate balance around here. Okay, now when I get to 28, I bring this almost to the place where I'm going to put the needles out of work. So let's see, 1, 2, 3 needles out of work. So once I get to this mark, I would put the needles out of work, but I'm going to stop. And then I start replacing all of the cylinder needles. Now, I seriously did myself a favor. When I took the cylinder needles out, I laid them all in the same direction so I can just grab a handful of them with the butt end facing out, because spending time completely like turning them upside down actually slows me down. Rotating was easy, but turning them around. So I just actually, you'd be surprised how many seconds I shave off by having them already in the same direction. It's like little stuff like that, but seriously, this one, because it's hard enough to put them in when you're not looking at them. You really have to run them straight across the groove. Okay, so I run out of real estate here with the arm here, which is why I turn this guy as far as I can. All right, now. And I'm not obsessively worried about whether the latches are open, because what's going to happen is I'm picking up the rubber needle and I'm putting it onto this, so it'll be open when I go to do that. I'll check it as I move it, fix it there. Okay, I could take the needles out and stretch them over top of the other needle, but I find that kind of fitty, actually. My fingers are not happy about that. So much easier just to lift the stitch. Okay. And like I said, if I got the camera here and I've got that light in my way, so this looks more fiddly than it actually is. Because I'm actually smacking the light. Then I'm trying not to lean into the picture too much, so that doesn't help. So basically, I'm just going to lift all these guys off. Then I will turn my cylinder, or every once in a while you get a little stuck. I will turn my cylinder and clear the space back there for the rest of the ones, so I can get them off too. Then I'll be able to lift the rubber off. Some people park their rubber and used it, which is cool, but in this case, I'm not going to use this rubber again. I don't rib across the foot. I don't really like that, and I don't rib down the leg either. There are some circumstances in which I would do that. I'm caught right here. But I haven't made anything yet in which those circumstances apply to me, so I'm not going to worry about that. But You could park your ribber. You would just take your needles out of work and you would continue knitting. Oh, I can't do that yet. That one is so not ready for me. You would continue knitting, and then, you know, whenever you needed to, you would swap the cylinder needles out again and work that way. But like I said, I'm not knitting, I'm not ribbing down the, okay. I'm not knitting down the foot, so there's no reason for me to park my ribber. Once I take it off, it's off, basically. Okay, so let's see. I gotta look again. 1, 2, 3. Go ahead and turn to my point. And then I'm gonna take my needle, my ribber out of work. Sometimes it gets a little sticky. It really depends on the position of my needle. Oh, there we go. Okay, see? Just need to get that out of the way. We'll put some more cylinder needles in. And I just got to be honest, I'm telling you, I'm probably making it look harder than what it is because this camera is in my way. Okay, so now let's go ahead and crank this past here. Okay, so I did take it past more than it needed to. So all I do is flip that latch closed and it's not a problem. Everything is out of work now. Putting the rest of the cylinder needles in. And I think this is the side you'll really be able to see it. Okay, and I'm just pulling it off. Over. Okay, let's see. Put this over here. Uh-oh. Sometimes the yarn is a little splitty. This particular yarn. Just because it's a soft yarn. And then there's a point like where I get to a certain side, like this, that I find it hard to do it. And this would be the point where I would flick this, pull this over. And that's only because of the way it's facing me. Okay, there we go. I'm gonna go ahead and crank all around. And now I can reach all of the rest of the needles. And it looks like I have 3 spaces left and I have 3 rubber needles. So I didn't lose any. I mean, occasionally I drop them, or I should say 3 cylinder needles. I dropped them and I'm like, where in the world did these guys go? And also too, I have a few needles that I have discarded from times past when I was breaking needles. or breaking latches. And of course, I just put them in the bin, where I just stuck them inside the yarn tub. And so I really need to take them and clean them, get them out of the way, so that when a needle does fall onto the floor, I'm not confusing the good needles with bad needles. And so you say, why keep bad needles? Because they actually make really good latch hooks. So there are reasons to reuse them if you want to. That yarn splits. I'm trying to put it all back on there. Okay. Now, once I get, this is the last one. Beautiful. And I can just pull the ribber off. And I park the ribber, well, I put the ribber over here, a little space here, where it needs to go. Looks like at some point I dropped a stitch. So I'm going to fix that drop stitch. But basically, everything is good. I'm going to stop there. That's just a little ribber itself overview. And hopefully it made some kind of sense. If not, I'll make another one eventually at some point. As I get better and better at this, they'll make more and more sense. Thank you. Have a great day.